Welcome back to another deep dive. We are really thrilled to have you joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.
Now, we've got a seriously compelling stack of notes in front of us today, and our mission for this deep dive is to completely decode the psychology of solitude.
Which is such a misunderstood topic.
Oh, entirely. We're pulling from this fascinating transcript, originally from the psychology-focused channel Alpha Speech. And the title translates to, and listen to this, "The scariest person is the one who is good at being alone."
Right off the bat, that title sounds like a psychological thriller or something.
I know, it really does. But the core premise here is completely reevaluating why the ability to be totally comfortable in your own company isn't about being lonely.
Right.
And it's definitely not about being cold. In fact, what we're going to explore is how mastering solitude functions as the ultimate psychological armor against manipulation.
It really requires a massive paradigm shift in how we view independence. Because most of the time, our culture frames solitude as a deficit.
Like a waiting room.
Exactly. Like a temporary waiting room you're just stuck in until you find the right partner or, the right friend group.
Yeah.
But diving into this material reveals that profound comfort with yourself is actually a highly evolved form of self-defense. We are looking at true emotional sovereignty here.
So we're going to explore how this trait operates out in the wild.
Right, how it radically alters the dynamic with the people around you.
And why it completely neutralizes the tactics of anyone attempting to control or exploit you.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because we have to start by redefining that word scary right out of the gate.
We definitely do.
Because when you hear the phrase scary person, your mind probably jumps to someone aggressive or unpredictable, maybe malicious.
Right, someone dangerous.
Yeah, but the framing here is completely different.
What's fascinating is that scary in this specific psychological context translates to intimidating and fundamentally impossible to control.
Impossible to control, that's the key. Yes. And the root of that inability to be controlled is the complete absence of the most common human vulnerability.
The fear of abandonment.
Exactly. When you remove that underlying terror of being left alone, you completely remove the leverage that manipulators rely on to operate.
Because they don't have that hook.
They have no hook at all. This individual doesn't feel a burning need to explain themselves. They don't scramble to prove their worth through someone else's eyes.
Right.
And they don't cling to relationships just to validate their own existence.
It's essentially opting out of a rigged game.
Totally.
And that ties directly into a very specific societal conditioning we all experience. I mean, think about how we are taught to view an empty room.
Oh, the empty room conditioning is so real.
You know that feeling when you're sitting at a restaurant table alone?
Waiting for a friend who is running late.
Yes. The immediate instinct is to just frantically scroll through your phone.
Just so you don't look like a tragic, lonely figure staring at the bread basket.
Exactly. From a very young age, a quiet Friday night with no plans or an empty house, it's painted as this ultimate cinematic shorthand for failure.
Society wires us to hate that feeling of isolation.
It does.
And we connect this to the bigger picture. Society doesn't just wire us to hate it. It practically trains us to be terrified of our own silence.
We're just constantly absorbing this message.
Yes, the message that if you aren't surrounded by people or actively engaging in a social network, you are somehow defective.
Right. But for the emotionally strong individuals highlighted in this material, that empty room undergoes a radical reframing.
It is no longer a symbol of social failure.
It becomes a sanctuary. And the critical detail here is that it is a space they entirely control.
They don't walk into a friendship or a romantic partnership desperately looking for someone to plug the leaky holes in their self-esteem.
So they aren't using people as life rafts.
No, not at all.
They are choosing relationships to complement a life that is already fully furnished, so to speak.
That's a great way to put it.
It reminds me of that old advice about never going to the grocery store when you're starving.
Oh, yes. Because when you're hungry, you grab the junk food.
You grab the quick fix, whatever is right in front of you. But when you go after you've just had a massive meal, you make deliberate, healthy choices.
You aren't operating from a place of sheer desperation.
Exactly.
The grocery store analogy is actually highly accurate for interpersonal dynamics. And because these individuals aren't socially starving, they completely disrupt the push-pull game.
The push-pull game, let's talk about that.
We all know attention is the modern currency.
Oh, absolutely. The dopamine hit of a rapid text reply.
Or social media validation, praise from a boss. It's an economy. But what we see here is how manipulators specifically weaponize that baseline addiction.
By artificially inflating your emotional economy.
Right. A manipulator will shower you with intense, overwhelming attention early on. They make you feel like the absolute center of the universe.
Love bombing.
Exactly. Then, once you're hooked on that currency, they deliberately and suddenly withdraw it.
The classic ghosting. Or the sudden cold shoulder.
Yes.
For the average person, that manufactured crash in the emotional economy creates a massive spike in anxiety.
You start chasing them.
You analyze every previous interaction, asking, what did I do wrong? How do I fix this? You become desperate to get that currency flowing again.
Because you're in withdrawal.
Right. But the person who is genuinely comfortable in their own company, they just short-circuit the whole dynamic.
Because the dynamic requires a willing participant to chase the withdrawal.
Yeah.
But if you pull away from someone who is deeply content in their own company, they simply don't chase you.
They just let you go.
Exactly. If a manipulator goes silent as a form of punishment, the solitary person doesn't panic. They just enjoy the quiet.
They don't possess that secret button for toxic people to press.
Precisely. The manipulator pushes the fear of abandonment button, expecting the standard panicked reaction, and realizes the wiring just doesn't connect to any alarm bell.
The primary weapon of control is rendered completely useless.
It is.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because moving beyond just emotional immunity, we get into what's described as the invisible chains of necessity.
The invisible chains, yes.
Think about the things you or people you know endure simply because of a perceived necessity.
People stay in soul-crushing, abusive work environments.
Because of the necessity of a paycheck.
Right. Or they remain in highly toxic relationships because the necessity of companionship outweighs the daily misery.
And over time, that necessity morphs into a very real, very heavy, invisible chain around your neck.
Building on that, the defining characteristic of this intimidatingly independent person is how actively they dismantle those chains before they can even be forged.
They're proactive about it.
Very. They aren't just sitting in a room meditating on their solitude. They are actively constructing diversified self-reliance.
So building financial independence.
Yes, financial independence,
Yeah.
cultivating emotional regulation, and securing the ability to make unilateral decisions without needing a committee's approval.
They engineer a life where they do not rely on a single external source for their fundamental survival.
And by doing so, they strip controlling personalities of their absolute favorite threat.
Which is the classic, if you don't have me, you'll struggle.
Right. If you leave this job, you'll go broke.
If you walk away from this relationship, no one else will want you.
The entire illusion of control relies on the victim believing they cannot function without the manipulator's support.
Whether that's financial backing,
Or access to a social circle, or simply daily validation. When you are entirely self-reliant, that threat holds zero weight.
zero.
The ultimate power this solitary person wields is their unflinching readiness to walk away if conditions become unfair or toxic.
They do not bluff.
They never bluff. If the terms of the deal in business or in love become unacceptable, they simply push back from the table and leave.
But let's play devil's advocate for a second here.
Okay?
If you never fear abandonment, and you are totally fine walking away from a bad deal at the drop of a hat, doesn't that run the risk of just being avoidant?
That's a fair question.
How do we differentiate between this healthy, powerful solitude and someone who just runs away the second a relationship requires hard work or compromise?
The distinction lies entirely in the motivation. Avoidant attachment is driven by fear.
The fear of vulnerability.
The fear of being seen, the fear of eventual rejection. So the avoidant person runs away to protect themselves from potential future pain.
I see.
But the psychologically strong, solitary person isn't running from fear. They are walking away from toxicity.
There's a big difference there.
Huge. They're perfectly capable of deep vulnerability and doing the hard work in a healthy relationship. But they refuse to engage in the sunk cost fallacy when a relationship turns abusive or manipulative.
That sunk cost fallacy is such a massive trap.
It really is.
We've all been there, pouring time, emotion, and energy into something that is clearly failing.
But you refuse to quit because you've already invested so much.
Right. And manipulators are absolute masters at weaponizing nostalgia to keep you trapped in that fallacy.
They absolutely are.
When you finally try to set a boundary or pack your bags, they don't fight you on the present facts. They bring up the past.
They say things like, think of all the amazing trips we took.
Or we used to love each other so much.
They use the ghost of a good memory to chain you to a miserable present.
Exactly. They weaponize your own hope against you.
But the person grounded in their own solitude overrides that manufactured hope with present-day data.
They respect the past.
Yes, they can honor the good memories that existed, but they absolutely refuse to let a good yesterday dictate a toxic tomorrow.
Past investments do not buy a manipulator a free pass for current abuse.
Never. And a striking detail in the analysis of this behavior is their decisiveness.
Right. When they recognize the situation is irreparably broken and they close a door, they do not leave it cracked open.
There is no ambiguous, maybe we can try again in 6 months.
The door is closed, locked, and they're already walking down a new hallway.
And that level of sheer unbothered decisiveness requires a core of self-worth that most people spend decades trying to build.
Which brings us to the difference between internal and external metrics of validation.
Right, because we all live on this exhausting 24-hour stage.
Society constantly demands that we present ourselves for judgment based on external metrics.
The prestige of our job title,
A square footage of our house.
the aesthetic of our partner, the number of followers we have online.
It is a never-ending, high-stakes performance for an audience of strangers.
And if your self-worth is constructed on that stage, you are entirely at the mercy of the audience's fluctuating moods.
If they applaud, you feel euphoric.
If they boo, or worse, if they're simply indifferent, your entire sense of self collapses.
So the self-reliant individual steps completely off that stage.
Completely. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean they suffer from delusions of grandeur or think they are perfect.
Right.
They see their own flaws, their own mistakes, and their own shortcomings with brutal clarity.
But they do not use those flaws as ammunition against themselves. They don't use self-awareness as an excuse for self-hatred. And because they've stopped performing for the audience, they develop what is described as an armor against criticism.
Yes, because if you truly know your own value, someone else's opinion of you is just data about them.
Not a reflection of you.
Right.
There's this incredibly vivid metaphor from the source material used to describe this mindset.
I love this metaphor.
For someone with true internal self-worth, an insult or a calculated attempt to make them feel inferior becomes just a sound passing through the ear.
Not a knife stabbing into the heart.
It's so powerful.
Think about the mechanics of that metaphor. A knife to the heart requires emergency surgery. It alters your life.
But a sound passing through the ear is just atmospheric noise.
You observe the sound waves of the insult. You might even analyze why the person felt the need to make the sound, but you do not internalize it as your reality.
This internal armor is precisely what allows them to be absolute masters at setting boundaries.
Because for the average person, setting a boundary is terrifying,
It risks upsetting the other party.
which risks abandonment.
Right. The thought process is usually, if I tell my demanding coworker I won't do their project for them, they'll hate me.
And then the office will be awkward.
And then I'll be an outcast.
Exactly, the spiral most people fall into. But for the solitary individual, that solid internal metric allows them to say the word no as a complete sentence.
Entirely without guilt.
They don't offer a 5-minute breathless apology.
They don't over-explain their reasoning.
They simply state the limit.
And concurrently, they do not demand that anyone place them on a pedestal.
Right, they aren't looking to be worshipped or adored by the masses.
But they will never, ever beg a single person to see their value.
If someone is committed to misunderstanding them or undervaluing them, they don't launch a PR campaign to change their mind.
They simply remove that person's access to their life.
This raises an important question, though.
Okay, what is it?
Practically speaking, in the real world, how does anyone actually pull this off? We live in an environment absolutely saturated with constant stimuli.
Our phones are constantly buzzing with outrage-inducing news.
Passive-aggressive emails.
Social media comparisons. Who does this scary person maintain that impenetrable calm? How do they not just snap and react like the rest of us?
The secret lies in a vital psychological concept, the deliberate cultivation of a gap.
A gap.
Yes. In a highly reactive person, there is zero space between a stimulus, let's say a rude comment from a family member, and their response.
They feel the sting of the insult and they instantly lash out in defense.
But emotional regulation is the practice of prying open a gap between the stimulus and the response.
And in that momentary pause lies all of their freedom and their power.
They observe the stimulus, they process it intellectually, and then they strategically choose their response.
Rather than operating on impulse.
Exactly.
And the way they process emotions inside that gap is completely different from the norm. Instead of being a slave to their feelings, they treat their emotions like dashboard indicators in a car.
I love that visual.
There are two profound insights here. To these individuals, anger is just a signal, not a command.
And fear is data, not a prophecy.
Consider how radically that rewires the human experience.
For most of us, anger is an overwhelming command. Yell, attack, defend your ego immediately.
And when we feel fear, it acts as a dark prophecy. Everything is going to fall apart. I am going to fail. Everyone will laugh at me.
But demoting those intense emotions to mere signals and data changes everything.
Anger becomes a simple signal flashing on the dashboard, indicating that a boundary has been crossed or an injustice has occurred.
And fear becomes data suggesting that you are stepping into unknown territory and need to proceed with caution.
You consult the data, you acknowledge the warning signal, but you remain the CEO of your own behavior.
So when a manipulator tries to drag them into a screaming match or tries to manufacture some massive chaotic drama just to make them lose their temper and look crazy,
These individuals completely refuse to provide the fuel.
they look at the manipulator's erratic behavior, recognize their own internal anger signal, but consciously choose not to follow the command to fight,
They just watch.
as though the manipulator spin out.
And they understand that in those high-stakes moments, absolute silence is often the most devastating answer you can possibly give.
You are starving the toxic person of the chaotic reaction they so desperately need to feel powerful.
To truly grasp why maintaining that gap is so incredibly difficult for the average person, we have to look at evolutionary biology.
We do. Our core human need for acceptance isn't a character flaw. It is rooted in our deeply primal fear of being kicked out of the tribe.
For our ancient ancestors, isolation didn't just mean feeling lonely on a Saturday night.
It meant literal death by starvation or predators.
We are biologically, evolutionarily wired to seek group validation and avoid ostracization at all costs.
But the tragic irony is that, in the modern world, blindly obeying that ancient programming causes you to lose your true self,
You become a chameleon.
constantly shifting your personality, your opinions, and your boundaries to please whoever happens to be in the room.
Until you don't even know what your original color was. You spend your entire life endlessly auditing your own personality to ensure it's palatable to absolute strangers.
It is the ultimate form of self-abandonment.
It sounds so exhausting.
The psychological journey of the solitary person is essentially the painful, necessary transition from childhood to true psychological adulthood.
They have evolved past the child who fundamentally requires a parent's praise to feel safe in the world.
And have become an adult who evaluates their own worth based on internal integrity, honesty, and effort.
They have effectively become their own parent and their own tribe.
Exactly.
Okay, we have covered some incredibly deep, heavy psychological territory today. Let's pull all of these threads together.
Let's do it.
Because the overarching theme of this deep dive isn't that you should sell all your belongings, go live in a remote cabin in the woods, and never speak to another human being again.
Being genuinely good at being alone is not about shutting out the world.
It isn't about transforming into a cold, unfeeling robot who doesn't need anyone.
It is actually about the exact opposite. It's about opening your heart fully, but doing it without ever losing your center of gravity.
The ability to remain whole is the ultimate goal.
You can love someone deeply, you can engage passionately with your community and your career, but your foundational structure remains entirely your own.
You aren't merging your identity with a partner or a job to the point where if they were to disappear tomorrow, you would cease to exist.
You remain a complete, structurally sound entity, regardless of who is standing next to you.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now?
It means that true, unshakable independence is about making choices from a place of abundance.
You are choosing your relationships, your career paths, and your daily actions because you actively want them.
Not because you are terrified of the alternative.
You aren't operating from a place of fundamental lack or a frantic, clawing fear of being left behind.
When you choose to share your life with a partner, it's because they add genuine joy and value to your days.
Not because you need them to validate your existence or pay your rent.
And the ultimate takeaway regarding the scary nature of this person is all about control.
When you have yourself completely.
When you are your own primary source of comfort, your own primary source of validation, and your own internal security system.
No one can ever control you with fear again.
The manipulator's entire toolkit is rendered obsolete.
You become, in the truest and most profound sense of the word, free.
Which is an incredibly empowering, albeit challenging, place to strive for.
It really is. But before we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with something to really chew on.
Something that takes everything we've just discussed about solitude and pushes it one step further into the reality we are all navigating today.
We've established that being perfectly content in our own solitude is the ultimate psychological shield against manipulation.
It is the very thing that makes us impossible to control.
Yeah.
So consider this. Does our hyper-connected, always online world deliberately cultivate our fear of isolation to keep us compliant?
Oh, wow.
Think about the design of our digital spaces, the endless algorithms, the constant barrage of notifications.
The manufactured dread of missing out on the cultural conversation?
Are we being subtly, algorithmically engineered by modern society to be utterly terrified of the very thing, solitude, that would make us truly free?
That's Joan.
If solitude is the ultimate armor against external control, perhaps the system is working exactly as intended to make sure we never put that armor on.
Man, that is a heavy, incredible question to ponder the next time you find yourself sitting alone in a quiet room, tempted to reach for your phone.
It really makes you think.
We hope this deep dive has given you a totally new perspective on the power and the necessity of your own company. Thank you so much for spending this time with us and for exploring these ideas alongside us.
Take care of yourselves out there.
And maybe today, just for a little while, enjoy the silence.